Respected Guruji, Swami Advaitanandji, Mr. Piramal, Mr. Sajdev, Ravi Bhai, delegates who have arrived from across the globe, respected leaders of industry, friends from different NGOs and other sectors, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. I truly have no words to thank the organizers for thinking of me to speak at this forum on such a special occasion on the completion of the centenary of the birth of a special son of Mother India. A person who tirelessly shared the knowledge of the Vedanta through his repeated messages on the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. A person who had the ability to transcend the knowledge of ocean and convert it into simple words, making it possible for the common man to understand the mysteries of life and the meaning of eternal existence. Swami Chinmayanand was a glittering example of the human mind having the ability to contain a cosmos of knowledge and the unique ability to transcend religions, cultures, territories, and put before us in very simple language the message of the Bhagavad. So before I start also, let me tell a short story, because it was on a hot summer afternoon in a mango grove in Bijnor district of western Uttar Pradesh that a group of Muslim Maulanas were discussing aspects of different religions. The period was sometime in the 1940s when India, struggling to achieve her independence, was like a mother caught between the crossfire of two disagreeing sons, Hindus and Muslims. Speaking here, Dr. Abdur Rahman Bijnori, a reputed scholar of Islam, a freedom fighter and a great friend of the Mahatma, had this to say, and I quote, he said, "India has been fortunate that it received the Bhagavad Gita, which is a divine book presented by God to our country," unquote. Dr. Bijnori's statement found utterance in the words of Gandhiji himself when he said, and again I quote, "This is a work which persons belonging to all faiths can read. It does not favor any sectarian point of view," a point which Mr. Piramal made. "It teaches nothing but pure ethics," unquote. And over the centuries, as we read and we reread the texts, we discover deeper and deeper philosophical content. Each stanza provides a scope for a variety of meanings and interpretations by different scholars, savants, pundits, philosophers from across the globe. In the 18th century, while reading the Gita, Wilhelm Humboldt, the Prussian ambassador of education, had said this, and I quote him, "I read the Indian poem for the first time when I was in my country, a state in Silesia. While doing so, I felt a sense of overwhelming gratitude to God for having let me live to be acquainted with this world. It must be a most profound and sublime thing to be found in the world," unquote. I myself read the Gita as a young student, just out of school, I think. And even then I found it a clear and comprehensive summary of what I believe to be eternal philosophy. And therefore, its enduring value is subject not just for India, but as we repeatedly see in the works of people like Humboldt, Huxley, Einstein, Freud, and many others, we learn of its eternal value for the world itself. So when Mr. Sajdev asked me to speak at this very important function, and in the midst of such people such as you, who would certainly have more knowledge than me on the subject, I had moments of grave self-doubt. I repeatedly asked myself whether I was competent to speak at such a gathering before people such as yourselves, speakers before me, and speakers that would come in the next 2 days. My thoughts actually went to the plight of Arjuna, besotted with a heightened nervousness on beholding his gurus, cousins, and the vast Kaurav army arrayed in front of him, I thought of the concept of self-doubt that is so much the basis and indeed the crux of human life. And here commences Lord Krishna's entire Gita lesson. And as my friend who's sitting in the audience told me today, that today is also the 3251st day when the Gita started. So it is a coincidence, Guruji, that we have you in our presence, and it is a great, great coincidence that we have this lecture. As his favorite disciple, besotted with a heightened nervousness, says, and I quote, "The Gandiva bow slips from my hand and my skin burns all over. I am unable to stand and my mind is wandering around as it was," unquote. Here Krishna begins to explain his concept of mental equipoise, something again which you mentioned, Mr. Piramal, clearly enunciating that he alone is fit for attaining immortality, who is not afflicted or disturbed by circumstance of pleasure or pain. But before I turn to the kernel of the Gita, that matchless remedy for self-realization, which is the renunciation of the fruits of action, I again hark back to a quote from Gandhiji that in very simple words explains the universality of this great book. And I quote, "The Gita is the universal mother. She turns away nobody. Her door is wide open to anyone who knocks. A true votary of the Gita does not know what disappointment is. He forever dwells in perennial joy and peace that passeth all understanding. But that peace and joy comes not to the skeptic or to him who is proud of his intellect or learning." As we came into this audience, there is also a quote from Pujya Guruji, which says that when you are coming here, leave your pride outside. It is only reserved for the humble in spirit who brings to her worship a fullness of faith and an undivided singleness of mind, unquote. The quintessence of the Gita revolves around the twin concepts of renunciation and devotional surrender on the underlying substratum of faith. This indeed is true of all great spiritual texts of the world. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahans, one of the greatest saints who lived in the 19th century, always emphasized on renunciation and devotional surrender as the core essence of the Gita, as also the guiding principle of the spiritual life of any aspirant. He also emphasized that the path of renunciation and surrender can only be trodden by those who are strong in faith. This is the kernel around which the Gita is woven. And again, as Gandhiji writes, this renunciation is the central sun around which devotion, knowledge, and the rest revolve like planets. The body is like a prison. There must be action where there is body. But then how can one be free from action or the taint of sin? The Gita answers the question decisively, and I quote Gandhiji again, "By desireless action, by renouncing fruits of action, by dedicating all activities to God, that is by surrendering oneself to Him, body and soul," unquote. Because from such action, man provides the necessary tonic to the Atma, and then one revels in Atma, for as the Gita says, and I quote, "But the man who revels in Atman, who is content in Atman, and who is satisfied only for him no action exists. He has no interest in anything done, nor in anything not done, nor does he need to rely on anything for personal ends," unquote. This is the complete sublime state, as the Indian poet Ghalib says in one of his more philosophical couplets. And he says, "Main adam se bhi pare hoon." I am beyond the beyond. Therefore, we see a struggle to achieve self-realization, and this struggle has to stand the test of renunciation of the fruits of action. Mere knowledge of right or wrong will not suffice for achieving salvation. And the Gita is very clear on this. Again, I quote, No one has attained this goal without action, unquote. That is what I think Mr. Piramal kept saying. So while we know what that action binds, it is equally true that human beings need to work. But then how is one free from the bondage of action? Here again is the formula offered by the Gita. I quote, "Do your allotted work, but renounce its fruits. Be detached and work, have no desire for the reward of work," unquote. Alongside this exhortation, the Gita is equally emphatic in cautioning against inaction and urging that action is the basic temperament or innate nature of living beings, and it is selfless action that one should strive for as part of social and spiritual evolution of man. And I hark back to Swami Vivekananda, who has very aptly said that you will understand the Gita by understanding your biceps. This is the ultimate sublime message of this divine book. He who works without the desire for the result and who is wholly engrossed in the due fulfillment of the task before him is said to have renounced the fruits of this action. Renunciation clearly implies absence of the hankering after the fruit of labor. You would notice that the Gita, the message gets repetitive. But then again, this is so in all philosophical religious books. If the true message has to be drilled repeatedly in minds of ordinary people such as myself. So let me take a break from the classical quotes of Gita and give you a couplet from Ghalib. This is highly Persianized, so I will translate it for you. He said, "Asad hum wo junu jola gadaye besaropa hain कि है सरपंजे मिशगाने आहू पुश्तखार अपना." He said, "Asad, I am such a wandering fakir who wanders in sheer madness in the forest that only the eyelids of the deer have the ability to see my back." The idea of the whirling dervish who is lost to the world, who has achieved the state of complete annihilation in the Almighty, what the Muslims call fana. This is also the renunciation of the Gita, which is the acid test of faith. He who is worldly or concerned over activities around him or the result of his own activities will lose nerve in the performance of his duty, something again which Ajay Bhai repeatedly said. He would be impatient, he would be angry, he would be distracted and willing to let go his principles. A perfect example is the life of Gandhiji himself, where his repeated actions exhibited his strong belief in these principles. And please recall the incidents at Chauri Chaura when the Congress smelt success, but the burning of the police station and the consequent deaths of a few policemen led the Mahatma to unilaterally call off the agitation, much to the grief and disgust of his comrades in the Congress party, including Nehru, Patel, and Rajendra Prasad. For Gandhiji, the ultimate outcome could not negate the path that he had chosen. And here lies the advantage of following this path, that one remains bound to follow the truth. I'm recounting this episode to emphasize one important point which is relevant in the modern context. That of the conflict between ends and means. Influential social philosophies across the world, including Marxism and various other ideologies, have thrived on the dichotomy between ends and means, holding that ends justify means. But true followers of Gita have used the ethics and the insight of the Gita to get over this dichotomy in political as well as personal life by holding that the division between ends and means itself was artificial and should be abandoned. The path to truth is only one. It does not admit of a division between ends and means which gives rise to ethical dilemmas. This harmonizing aspect of the Gita makes it very much a contemporary and an eternal philosophy. Here I wish to add one more thing. And I have struggled to frame this paragraph because I find that, that words have often the inability to explain things properly. So if you find it convoluted, please forgive me. There is seemingly a contradiction when we link work without reward to renunciation, and then link that to the concept of infinite love with the Almighty. The contradictions arise because, to my mind, we are trained to think and interpret words as we hear them, although the simple meaning of the word has a limitation in itself and cannot encapsulate the entire thought process. Often older languages such as German or Latin or even Sanskrit provide greater clarity in explanations. Action without worry for fruit of the action leads to a mind without fear. A direct corollary then is the mind which has not bound itself within constraints of reward, etc. That is the final renunciation. And if there is renunciation of this kind, it comes from divine love and indeed leads to divine love. Therefore, to get into the deeper thought processes of the Gita, we cannot limit ourselves to the literal meanings of the words in young languages like English or Hindi or even Urdu. Understanding of the deeper meanings, fortunately not through an intellectual process, but through repetitive hearing, has become part of our ethos in India, and that has helped us to internalize many of its aspects. Coming now to the theme of devotion, the Gita is clear, and I quote, "Have devotion and knowledge will follow," unquote. But this devotion is no soft-hearted effusiveness. It is certainly not blind faith. Rosaries, prayer marks on the forehead, a dress code, these are no barometers for true devotion. A true devotee is jealous of none. He is a fount of mercy. He is without egotism. He is selfless. He is alike in cloud and heat, happiness and mercy. He is ever forgiving. He is contented, whose resolutions are firm, who causes no dread, who is not afraid of others, who is free from exaltations, sorrow, and fear, who is pure, who is versed in action and yet remains unaffected by it, who renounces all fruit, good or bad, who treats friends and foes alike, who is untouched by respect or disrespect, who is not puffed up by praise, who does not go under when people speak ill of him, who loves silence and solitude, and who has a disciplined reason. This concept of complete surrender is also the nectar of faith in all religions. The Sufis in Islam, the priests and nuns devoting their entire lives in seminaries, the sadhus wandering the forests have always this precept of complete surrender or selfless love without extending the belief in God to an extended logic of the hows and whys of existence. Intellect has no space here. It is complete surrender of the lover to the beloved, the surrender of the moth to the candle flame, or as they say in Farsi, fana ho jana. It is with this concept of surrender comes the awakening of the Kundalini, the coiled serpent, master of all knowledge, to uncoil itself and rise through the chakras, to burst through the Sahasra chakra, unfolding hidden mysteries and knowledge to us. The concept of complete surrender and thereby the acquisition of hidden knowledge. It has been beautifully described by an Urdu poet. His name is Siraj Dakhani. I will again read in Urdu and translate it for you. And he says, "वो अजब घड़ी थी मैं जिस घड़ी लिया दर्स नुस्ख़ाए इश्क का कि किताब अक्ल की ताक में जो धरी सी त्यों ही धरी रही." What a moment that was. The moment when I took lesson from the book of love. The book of reason that was on my shelf stood where it was, never to be picked again. And he goes on to say, किया खाक आतिश इश्क ने दिल बेनवाए सिराज को न खतर रहा न हजर रहा मगर एक बेखबरी rahi. The flames of love turn into ashes, the voiceless heart of Siraj. No danger, no fears remain. All that remains is utter absorption. The Gita is not a simple narrative. It's a great, great religious poem. The deeper you dive in it, the richer the meanings you will get. And of course, as I said earlier, that since it is written for all people, there is a lot of repetition. This is necessary for all religious texts as they speak to the masses, and therefore makes repetition almost necessary. The Gita sings praises of knowledge. It is beyond mere intellect. It is essentially addressed to the heart and capable of being understood by the heart. Therefore, I say the Gita is not for those who have no faith. The author makes Krishna say, and I quote, "Do not entrust this treasure to him who is without sacrifice, without devotion, without the desire for his teaching, and who denies me. On the other hand, those who will give this treasure to my devotees will, by the fact of this service, assuredly reach me. And those who, being free from malice, will with faith absorb this teaching and shall, having attained freedom, live where the people of true merit go after death." Life, like all great spiritual treasures of the world, the Gita is not just a spiritual text. And here again, I hark back to what Ajay Bhai was saying. It has great societal significance, aiming also at mass welfare and social harmony. The very fact that it uses the thick of the battlefield as its context clearly shows that the battlefield is used here as a metaphor for life, for all its struggles and conflicts. It is thus not a theoretical exposition by a saint in a hermitage. It is meant to be a living beacon for those who strive through real life, but at the same time aspire to evolve internally on the way through it. Another of the great harmonizing concepts of the Gita is that of dharma, which is the concept of duty, encompassing the attitude and action of the individual on the one hand, and the normative order of society on the other. Thus, it strikes a balance between individual aspiration and societal expectation and order. The concept of trusteeship, which you mentioned, this, albeit in a spiritual context, is enshrined deeply in the Gita. This deeply influenced thinkers like Gandhiji in his definition of relationship to public assets and resources. That concept remains relevant to this day for reviving the true spirit of public service, where one holds power or assets in trust for public welfare. Remember how Gandhiji staked his life for returning 75 crores to the newly formed Pakistan, which albeit had been formed at the division of this country. Another striking aspect of the Gita is its non-prescriptive nature and its strong emphasis on freedom of the individual to realize his identity. This aspect makes it stand apart from various mass philosophies which aspire to a common single goal. Each individual is free to understand the Gita in his own way. That is the secularism of what Mr. Sachdev said, and adapt and follow it for his personal benefit and evolution. In modern life, particularly for professionals who are exposed to tremendous stress at workplace and even at home, the Gita gives a very practical way out for stress management. As Swami Vivekananda advised the youth of the country, since external environment cannot be managed, one should manage the entire internal environment and cultivate equanimity and equipoise, as the Gita repeatedly teaches us. And as I wind up, I can say that once again, sir, I'm truly humbled and honored by this extremely unique opportunity you have given me to speak at such a momentous occasion, and indeed on such a momentous day. I remain grateful to the organizers, for I am but a humble student of this magnificent work, and the talk here today does not contain a minuscule of the wealth of wisdom that it contains. I wish the Chinmaya Mission Trust, all its centers, its acharyas, all the very best, and pray that the mission will continue to impart Gurudev Chinmayanand's great desire to see the Bhagavad permeate all spheres of our life. And may the Almighty give you the strength to carry on with your mission. Once again, thank you very much.